Pocho sampo pagyo trashi pa tuche tempe tinle yarngoda belge drolor zambe zeparche palde lame shabla solvade Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Karma Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha San Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Karma Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munish Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Pakyuke kudan dagi alo pakyuke sundan dagi nga pakyuke tudan dagi yi tön yerme çıktı çingi alo makyuke kudan dagi alo Ma kyuke sundan dagi nga Ma kyuke tuğdan dagi yi Tön yerme çıktı çingi alo Om Mahamuni Shakyamunye Svoha Om Muni Mahamuni Shakyamunye Svoha Om Muni Mahamuni Shakyamunye Svoha Sashipeke Choshimeto Tramare Rabalingashi Nide Gempadi Sange Shintu Mikte Ulovarki Drokunanam Dashingla Chöpar Shoyedam Ratna Mindrala Kam Niryatayami Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chin Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupareshu Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chin Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki drola pinchira sangye druparashu sangye chedan tsogi chonamla jancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi chushe gibe sonam ki drola pinchira sangye druparashu.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Good morning. I wanted to begin today with a question. A question that apparently can seem easy. It is, as a question, it is easy, but maybe the answer for some is very clear and for others a little less. The question is, why are we here? Here we're together in this place, but why? Why are we here? Obviously, if we asked each person individually, if we were to ask each person, their reasons, we would have many different reasons, many different answers. Maybe someone's curious. Maybe someone thinks that he considers himself Buddhist and feels like he needs to follow teachings. Maybe someone has a different kind of need. There are many, many different reasons why we find ourselves here. But in the end, but all the answers that we could give, there's something in common among all of these answers. There's a why that we all have in common. It's the same reason why we do everything we do in our lives. And someone might ask, what's in common, between going to the temple, listening to teachings on the introduction to Buddhism, and what does that have to do with what's in common? Why is that in common with going out to a disco on a Friday night or going to lunch with friends? What's in common? What is in common with everything we do is that we do everything we do because we want to be happy and we don't want to suffer. So we're constantly looking for what we can do. What can I do to be happy? What can I do to avoid suffering? And constantly we're looking. We're constantly trying to get this in many different ways. There are those who dedicate more time to a certain activity or to another, but at the end of the day, what we're looking for is happiness, being well. And this is not something we've started today to look for. I mean, since the beginning of our society, the beginning, even beyond just human beings, other forms of life, animals. For example, I have 3 three dogs at home. Or do they try to be happy? Do they try to avoid suffering? Of course. And they do everything possible to get there in the same way we do. And in our history, the history of mankind, when we go to see, we've tried in many different ways to obtain this state of peace and joy, and we're still looking. For example, we have, I call it a kind of law, this idea, this principle, even if I think it's very present in our reality, even though I think it's wrong. And the idea is that to be happy, we need to apply the law of minimum effort and maximum comfort. So even looking around with the different technological developments, we're constantly trying to do things in an easier way, where we need less effort and more comfort. Just look, for example, the lifestyle that someone has, a middle class person has much more comfort than kings of the past. And so we're constantly trying to work less, put less effort into things, and to have more comfort. We want cars that drive themselves. We want robots at home that do things. And in a few years, this will probably be possible. We're not that far. If I ask a lot of people, would it be comfortable? Would it be convenient for you to have a robot at home that washes your dishes and cleans? Yes, I mean, if we could have a couple robots here at the center, I would take them right away. But the point is about many different things. If we have this possibility to do something, if we're able to do the same activity with less effort, I mean, will we try to do that? Yes. So, but at the end of the day, why do we want to put less effort into it? Because we equate for effort with suffering, and we don't want to suffer. We recognize comfort as being pleasurable, and we want to be well. At the same time, but at the same time, we're at a phase in our history that what's happening more and more, we're increasing our level of comfort in a way that has never been seen before. Not for everyone, but let's say among the 8 billion people on the earth, a handful of billion are living the effects of comfort. And we're also increasing at the same time. So as we're living more comfortably, also the use of drugs is increasing for anxiety, for restlessness, for insomnia. This shows us that something's not working. So it's true that today, to try to not suffer and to be happy, which is the same things. These are two sides of the same coin. And to avoid suffering and be happy. So we've applied this law of minimum effort and maximum comfort. We've also applied the law of to more and more pleasure, the stimulation of our senses. We eat what we like. We experience what we enjoy. We stimulate our senses, thinking that the stimulation of our senses equates to more happiness. And for me, there's a golden rule, the most important among all of them, which is do whatever you want. Do whatever you want without moralism. Or what's important is that it works for you. What does that mean, that it works? It means that it actually increases your state of well-being and happiness and diminishes your suffering. So on one side, it seems incredibly permissive, but when we really apply it, we'll see actually it's very restrictive. And in our society, the way things are evolving, it's very obvious that what we're doing on one side works, but most of it is not working for us. Because if it worked, we wouldn't need to fill up our space with emotional problems, mental, psychological problems that are there. Because if we ask ourselves, for us and the people around us, do we have more physical suffering or more mental suffering? In your opinion? Does anyone have any doubt about this? One master of Lama Ganchen kept it so Rinpoche. He was very direct, and I didn't have the opportunity to meet him, but I heard his teachings, and in one recording he said, suffering is of two types. There's physical suffering and mental suffering. The poor suffer mostly from physical suffering, and the rich suffer mostly from mental suffering. And at the end of the day, they suffer the same. So the increase of mental suffering that we have, that we're seeing, is a symptom that actually we try to eliminate suffering. We're trying to reach a state of joy and balance, but in a way that is not sustaining it. This, for me, is quite clear. And so here's the question, what can we do about this? Because this looking for happiness is what we all do, what we all share. So the first question that I ask myself, and I asked myself for a long time, quite seriously, and here I'll follow the question, or follow with the answer I gave myself. So before asking ourselves what to do, before asking what we can do to be happy, the question is it possible to live in a state of balance? Is it possible to live in a state of satisfaction and peace, in harmony with oneself and with others? Or is it not possible? Because it's a little bit like that question, well, where did everything begin? This planet, how did everything start? Many times people ask me, but according to Buddhism, where did everything start? What's true is that in Buddhism, we don't ask that question. That we have a question that comes before that, which is there a beginning? And the answer is no. And given that there's no beginning, we don't ask where that beginning is. And the reason why we say that there is no beginning, because if there were a beginning, then that means that there needs to have been something that had existed without having had its original cause, but that could also interact and bring results. And anything that interacts is a result of something else. It doesn't matter how far back we go in the past, there's always something that comes before that brought that. Something permanent that doesn't interact cannot at some point interact. But to be very sincere, just to close this parenthesis, what difference does it make to me if there was a beginning and how, how it started? In the end, here I am, and I need to live this existence and interact with others. It's a little bit like, and we could spend years and years talking about things that on a practical level have nothing to do with us. Sometimes within Buddhism, there are discussions about how a Buddha perceives this or that. I mean, we can spend whole days, elaborating, trying to think about how it is. But at the end of the day, how can I apply that to my daily life? The day that I will become, the day that I will reach Buddhahood, I hope, then I'll be able to understand that. I'll see that. So the question is it possible to be happy, to live in a state of peace, or harmony, satisfaction, being well with oneself and well with others? Is it possible or not? To get to that answer, we need a little bit to see the opposite, the side of suffering. And here we have another question. Why do I suffer? What's not going right? It's said that one day someone went to Buddha and asked him about what he thought about the existence or non-existence of God, or the various gods who we're talking about India, about 2,500 years ago, Indra, Brahma, Vishnu. And it's said that Buddha said, I'm not here to talk to you about the existence or the non-existence of one God or many gods. I'm here to tell you that your suffering and your happiness depends on you. And I can tell you how to increase your happiness and eliminate your suffering. And after in a sutra, the Buddha is written, it's said, I am my own protector. I am my own enemy. When we ask ourselves why we suffer, in our spontaneous way of seeing it, our natural way, without philosophizing or asking intellectual questions. Instead, if we answer from our gut when we're not feeling well, do we point our finger outside or towards ourselves or to nothing, and we just wait for it to pass? What do we do when we're suffering? Mostly, if I'm suffering, it's because something is not going right. Because if the world were the way I think it should be, if people acted the way I think they should act, I'd be fine. If it depended on me, I'd be happy, right? I don't know if you've ever had this thought, oh, if this wasn't like this, if that wasn't like that, I'd be just fine. But what happens when those things change and actually become the way you want it to become? Then you find something else that's not right. But our tendency, every time that we have this feeling of malaise, the suffering, one of the first things that we do is we ask ourselves why we're suffering. In asking why we're suffering, our tendency is to look outside and look at the world around us, look for a reason that actually matches our state of being. Another way to say that is that what we do with a certain frequency is we try to create around us a narrative, a storyline that is that corresponds to our emotions, to our state of being. So we try to see the world around us through what we feel. And if we were to observe with a little bit of attention, there's this process where I feel something and I say, why? And I look around for the reason. I don't know if you see yourselves in this. Sometimes it's more obvious, sometimes it's less obvious, but generally speaking, when we feel suffering or joy, our tendency is to find, to look for a reason, an external reason. So, in our way of seeing, I am not my own enemy. The enemy is the world around me. So, what are my enemies? What generates suffering in me? It's the fact that things are not the way I think they should be, that people don't act the way they should. It's the fact that I can't reach my object of desire, that I need to live situations that I don't like, that I need to be separated from that which I love or like. If I'm on vacation, why does it have to end? Oh, I love that person so much, but I can't be together with that person. Instead, I don't like that person and I have to spend time with them. I don't like this aspect of my job. And now that I feel fine, I'm starting to age. And we have so many things that we can call the various reasons that make us suffer. Our spontaneous, our enemies. When we say enemies, it's that which makes us suffer. And our enemies are situations around us. Situations, I mean people, relationships among people, objects, some places that don't allow us to have what we want from our point of view, or that they don't correspond to what we think should be, or it's in a way that it shouldn't be, or because we need to be separated from something that we like. These are the three main reasons, the three main reasons, the three main places we project our suffering. Think about your own life, a moment of suffering, and see if it doesn't fall into one of these three categories. Normally, yes. So the way we live is I am not my own. I'm not my own protector. If it were just up to me, I'd be fine. But the world is bad, and the people don't act correctly. Things are not the way they should be, etc., etc. So normally, when we suffer, we project outside. But let's observe this a little better. Some time ago, in a very short time, I had two experiences that really made me reflect. Within just 3 or 4 days, I lived one experience. It was a situation that we could call it a very difficult situation connected to death, etc. But I saw that I lived that situation in peace, even if in the general image, general view, it would be considered a very difficult situation. But I was at peace. And then just a few days later, I lived another experience, something specific experience that was really banal, simple. which most people would say, that's nothing. But instead, I lived it really badly. I was in conflict. I suffered in front of that experience. And that really had me think, asking myself, how is that possible? And I was able to recognize within. I talk about myself because I don't like talking about others. Even if we're all quite similar, what I saw is that when I'm in any situation, regardless of what it is, the situation that I live, it's as if it rang a bell within. It made, and it looks for something. If it finds something that is not resolved, some kind of inner conflict, a specific wound or pain, that resonates that trauma, and I live that experience through that non-resolved wound. So in that first example, even if the situation was quite difficult, but it didn't resonate any kind of pain within, I lived it well. Instead, that second situation, no matter how unimportant that situation was, it really touched something within, and I lived it badly. How often does it happen that similar situations are lived in a different way, differently? And to understand this well, we need to take another step. Reflect on the fact that every one of us is completely incapable of living anything independently of the filter of ourselves. Any situation, every situation we live, every person we meet, every place we go, we live it, we experience it through the filter of our education, our past experiences, our past emotions, our physical state at the moment, the social context in which we grew up. I mean, there's so many filters that add up, one on top of the other, that are part of our being, that make it so that we perceive that person or that place like that through this filter. I mean, we think that we see others. It's normal that I say to you, I see you, but as I see you, actually, who I see, I don't see you. I'm seeing my version of you, and in the same way, you're seeing your version of me. I'm sure that if I were to describe the version of the idea that I have of myself, and you were to describe your version of me, they wouldn't match. And not because I'm the Lama like this, but just for anybody. No one is able to perceive anything independently from the filter of self. The example that I've given many, many times is the sound. When I play this singing bowl, and if I were to ask you, did you hear the sound of the singing bowl? The answer would be yes. And if someone asks the person next to them, did you hear the singing bowl? Yes, but then I ask, well, what sound? Which singing bowl? There's one. I mean, the one that I'm playing is this one here. There's only one. It's not that there's a singing bowl for each person. So without analyzing, without philosophizing, are you listening to the same sound that I am listening to? The answer would be yes. But now let's analyze a little bit. Let's philosophize a little bit. The experience of listening to sound is made up of 3 parts plus 1. The first 3 are called contact, which is the union of 3 things. Sensory object. So when I play the singing bowl, what happens? These vibrations against the metal generates the vibrations in the air. That air comes towards us, comes into contact with our sense power of hearing. So sensory so the sensory object is what we call sound, and that sound that comes to my hearing, that vibration in the air, the vibration in the air that comes to my hearing and to your hearing, is it the same? There's a saying in Tibetan, which is what is similar is by definition different. So it's similar, this vibration in the air that comes to me and that comes to each one of you. Is it the same or is it different? It's different. So the sensory object is different. The sense power, our actual hearing, is our hearing the same? I mean, it's similar because we're human beings, but according to our age, according to many physical characteristics, how we listen to, how we hear different frequencies, is it the same? Is our hearing the same? No. That third part, sense consciousness. The sense consciousness is the part of our mind that acquires the information that comes to our hearing and sends it to the brain, let's say, makes that connection. So our sense consciousness depends on how used we are to sounds. For example, those children who are used to hearing a certain language, they're different languages. They're used to hearing different frequencies. For example, so when, for example, the Tibetan alphabet, ka, 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 it all sounds the same. Chinese even worse. I mean, if one is not used to these different tones, if one is not trained in these tones, it sounds the same. So, what is it? It's our sense consciousness of hearing that is able to discern the different frequencies. So, and this sense consciousness of hearing, is it the same? Do we all have the same, or are all of ours different? So our contact, the actual object is different. Our sense power is different. Our sense consciousness is different. So did you hear the sound that I heard? No. And then on top of these three, there's one more. When we hear the sound, we add what is called discernment. We attribute a meaning to that object that we perceive. So I say, oh, that's the sound of a singing bowl. And that meaning connects with emotions or previous moments that I heard that same sound. For example, if maybe the first times that someone heard a similar sound received a caress, then connects that sound with that caress. Instead, if someone were getting beaten together with the first times he heard this sound, then when he would hear that sound, it would recall that trauma. Reminds me of a friend who had been into Africa for a job and where there was war. And in this place, unfortunately, she saw that there were many bunkers where the children many bunkers, and the children would take refuge there because these bombs, they would land and the fire would go straight across and not go underneath. And then I saw here then I saw here that same military plane was being used as a cargo plane. So people who had lived those people who had lived those experience of extreme fear, they're going to connect that same sound of this plane, even though now it's a cargo ship. So this connects also, so together with the name that we give, it's connected also to the emotions that we have previously felt. Did you hear the singing bowl? Did you hear what I heard? Without philosophizing, we would say yes, but if we just analyze for a moment, the answer is no. So, every time that we see something, that we hear something, our experience is totally conditioned by our being and all of its characteristics. There are certain characteristics of ours that make it so that we live situations with suffering. Some are dissatisfaction, anger, hate, resentment, sadness. There's unlimited attachment connected to dissatisfaction. There's fear. There's envy, jealousy, and many other similar. There are these kinds of feelings. And then there are also positive feelings that when they're present, they bring the person to a state of more well-being, gratitude, satisfaction, joy, love, compassion, balance, generosity, humbleness, not understood as a sense of inferiority, but not having to compare oneself to see one's own self. It's states of being that through that emotion one feels good. So when that filter is present, whatever happens, when that filter is present, everything's fine. Like, for example, if I go in front of a snow-capped mountain and I have pink glasses on, pink lenses, the snow appears pink to me. Or if my lenses are blue, the snow is blue. If I go to meet someone and the filter that I have, if I have the filter of resentment and anger and sadness, I'm going to see that situation through those emotions. Like it happened to me not too long ago, actually, a couple of weeks ago. I woke up in the morning and on the wrong side of the bed. I didn't feel good. And I saw that first tendency was to look. It was to look for a reason, like, oh, it's because of this or that thing. But in that case, I was able to observe, and I realized I'm simply not feeling fine. And the day before I was absolutely fine, and that day was quite similar to the previous day. So I just said to myself, it'll pass. Things change. I can't tell you exactly why I felt like I did. It's a mixture of so many things, and what it was exactly, I don't know. But one thing I'm sure of is I'm sure that it'll pass. So I'll put energy into things that make me feel better, and it'll pass. And after 2 days, I was absolutely fine. So there's something to me that's very, very clear. These emotions, I mean, there's certain inner states of being. There are certain states of being, these filters that allow us to live things well, and those negative ones, that these filters, so-called mental defilements, that make us live experiences negatively. So here's the question. Is it possible to diminish anger in general in our lives? Or can you do nothing with your anger? In your opinion? It's possible to diminish one's anger. Is it possible to become a more satisfied person? Is it possible to have more patience, less jealousy, less envy, more gratitude? What's the limit? Is there a limit? Like, okay, you can't go below this point. Is there a limit or there's no limit? There's no limit to the diminishing of a negative feeling. What about the limit of gratitude or love? So unlimited love is unconditional love. So when we observe more carefully, we see that in reality, those inner states through which we live our life badly, it's possible to change them. And those through which we live life well, we can actually increase them. And here we come to the answer. Is it possible or not possible to be happy? If it is possible, even with dedication and effort and everything necessary, and it's not, like I said, it's not immediate and it's not easy. It is possible to eliminate arrogance, anger, fear, these mental defilements, and develop more and more virtuous inner states of being that bring happiness. This means that it is possible. It is possible to be well. It is possible to not suffer. Within this, there's a very important point. It's obvious on one side, but it's just important to understand it on a non-conceptual level. I had a first level of understanding of this the first time I came to Albagnano. I don't know why it was that time exactly. I was, it was Francesco and Gabriella who picked me up from the airport from India. It was in '99, and we were driving along lakeside at night, even though it was raining. Said even if it's rain and it's raining and it's night, it's still nice. I was so tired. So many hours on the plane. I I had traveled for over 12 hours. I couldn't see anything, but I said, oh, okay, fine. Just to give you the context that it wasn't any kind of mystical moment. It was a very normal, everyday experience. But in that moment, for some reason, I had a kind of realization. In Brazilian, we use the expression when the token falls, like those old telephones when you'd put in the token and it wouldn't catch, but then when the token finally catches. And something that gave me a tremendous amount of made me really relax. And the idea that came to me was that problems exist and they will always exist, because before I was living my life thinking that once this is fine, then everything else will be well. When I'm able to resolve this problem, then everything will be fine. But in life, we know that when one problem ends, another one begins. And the crazy thing is when there's an exception, when one problem ends and we don't have another problem in front of us, we create it ourselves. This is normally what happens. When I understood, okay, there are problems and there will always be problems. Why did this relax me so much? Because it helped me change my perspective, and my objective was no longer about living in a world without problems where everything was fine, because that's an illusion. I know a lot of people And I've never known anyone whose life was perfect. Even though in Brazil you say, how are you? Oh, everything's fine. But everything fine, I've never met anyone whose life was everything fine. I've known marvelous, marvelous people, balanced people, joyous people in peace, like Lama Michel Rinpoche, like other masters of mine, really wonderful people. But I've never met anyone who didn't have his problems and different difficulties. So if problems exist, and they will always exist, what's my objective? It's no longer about resolving problems, but being at peace with myself and with others independently of the situation that I find myself in. That my objective becomes to be autonomous, where my happiness and my suffering, because they're more or less the same thing, that they are not conditioned by the world around me. In other words, I need to reach a state of peace and balance with myself that allows me to be well with myself and with others, regardless of the situation. And someone might say, well, this is utopia, but this idea of being happy, living in a perfect world, is that not a utopia? Thinking that the world can correspond to our expectations without problems, that's a utopia. But being at peace with oneself to then be at peace with the world seems a lot less of a utopia. Have you already reached that point? I'll say no, but I'm taking steps one after the other. And that's also one of the reasons why I'm here together with you. I'm sharing something that I personally believe, because otherwise there wouldn't be much reason for being here. So going back to the starting question, is it possible or not possible to be happy? Yes. Yes, it is happy. Also because personally, I've had this opportunity to meet people I've met people who've lived situations that are similar to mine and have lived those situations with a tremendous amount of harmony and balance. Starting from Lama Michel Rinpoche, who lived all sorts of situations and problems, including difficulties of physical pain or being heavily criticized. I never ever saw him lose his balance. So he's an example of that shows me that it's possible. And also we have the experience of living the same or similar situation. Maybe at first it's painful, and then that same situation doesn't bother us. So if it is possible to diminish our suffering and increase our happiness, the second question is how? And according to Buddha, the answer can be found in that phrase that we said before, I am my own protector, I am my own enemy. Generally speaking, in a natural, spontaneous way, we believe that it's possible to be happy and not suffer. We have this hope, and we're constantly looking for something. But as we said before, we live this starting from the principle that I am not my own protector, and I'm not my own enemy. So where do I look for protection, understood as what makes me feel well? I look around the world around me. I look for situations that make me happy, people who make me happy. I try to get my objects of desire. I, I look for objects of desire and attachment, and I avoid objects of aversion. And we live in in this, in this mechanism. As we said before, we try to get what we want, which are not just material things. Among the various objects of desire, the strongest desire that we have is the attachment to reality the way we think it should be. This attachment that tells us that this person should act in this way. A lot of our energy goes into how we think things should be, and then into getting objects of desire of all kinds. And we also try to avoid objects of aversion. And we put energy also into trying to hold on to objects of attachment. What I like, what I like makes me happy, and I don't want to be parted from it. Is that possible, or is that not possible? Is it possible to get everything that we want? In my opinion, it's not. Also because there's a very simple rule. The more I have, the more I want. And at the end of the day, the more I want, the less I have. When we're able to get what we want, after a while, it's not enough and we want something else. So getting everything we want is not possible because that desire is infinite. This takes me to the definition of economy, of the classic definition of economics, the classic one. Now there are more modern ones, but was something like, economics is the science to satisfy the infinite desires of man with the finite resources of the planet. It's craziness. But it's really sincere. This definition is really sincere. But is it possible to satisfy something that's infinite? Much less with something that is finite. So the first illusion, this utopia, this illusion is thinking that we can satisfy our desires, getting everything that we want. The second illusion is the one where we want to avoid everything we don't like. Is that possible? Also because, let's say I really like the sound of the singing bowl. It's really nice. But if I just keep playing it, and we spend all day long playing the singing bowl, and wherever I go, there's the singing bowl that's ringing. Is it going to stay pleasurable? After a while, it becomes, it becomes painful. And when it stops, we think, oh, thank goodness. So what at the beginning, that is something that at the beginning is pleasurable, when it stays, after a while, it becomes painful. For example, if someone that we love starts caressing us, at the beginning, we like it. But if that caress continues with that same intensity for a half an hour, 40 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, at a certain point, if one wants to be nice, one finds a reason to get up, saying he needs to go to the bathroom or something. So something that the beginning is pleasurable, after a while becomes suffering. So the idea of being able to avoid everything that we don't like is a total illusion, because even what we first find pleasurable then becomes painful. And what about the last point, holding on to pleasure? a situation, an object, or a person. I mean, when we have something we like, we try to not lose them, to not be parted from them. But is that possible? You know, or anything that we come into contact with, sooner or later, we need to be parted from. Sooner or later, sooner or later, um, we're parted from these objects. This is another illusion. So when we say that I am not my own protector, it means that I look for, I look for, um, that I look for my happiness in trying to get my objects of desire, in avoiding my objects of aversion and holding on to my objects of attachment. But when I say that I am my own protector, it means that my happiness doesn't depend on getting my object of desire, but it depends on my satisfaction, because satisfaction is not the result of getting the object of desire. The satisfaction is about giving satisfaction comes from the value that we give to what we have, because the value of something, is that based on some intrinsic value or based on on a sub on based on some subjective idea of comparing to something else, um, on a very superficial level. Once our basic needs are covered, anything in addition, whether it's a lot or a little, that depends on the value that we attribute to it. Even when our basic needs are not met, this can also be true. Of course, if I'm hungry, I'm hungry. But the point that I want to get to is that our state of happiness does not depend on the world around us, but it depends mostly on the way we live the world around. Because satisfaction, which is one of the keys for happiness, is not the result of getting the objects of desire. It's the result of giving value to what one has. It's not the result of an external reality. If I have a lot of anger inside of me, it doesn't matter where I go. I could even live with a Buddha, and I will live through that filter of anger. And once, and I'm not saying that I'm a Buddha, once I went to go talk a few years ago outside Milan, and in that teaching, someone came to me and said, "How you allow yourself to be so arrogant to come here and I can't remember the word that he used. It was arrogant." And I said, "Explain to me, what do you mean? Why?" He said, "Here we have our problems, and you come here with all of your joy and your peace." I said, "I'm sorry, but it can happen that the state of well-being and peace can bother someone else. So if I'm unhappy, if I'm not well, even in being in the presence of someone who is happy, that disturbs me. So I live through that filter, and so I'm my own enemy." The Buddhist teachings are based on many principles, mostly these. And this is the first division. There are two different paradigms, worldviews. The one that's called spiritual and the one that is mundane. So that which distinguishes whether a path is spiritual or mundane is 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 about where one projects one's happiness. If I think that my happiness and as a consequence also my suffering are results of the world around me, and then to be happy I need to live in a certain way, this is a mundane view. If I think that my happiness, my state of non-suffering is a reflection of how I live the world through my inner qualities, that's a spiritual view. And many of us, we can call ourselves Buddhists, but we really follow a mundane view. A classic example is, you ask a Buddhist, what are the causes of suffering? It says, oh, the causes of suffering are the mental defilements like anger and jealousy and arrogance that come from selfishness, this obsession with self-grasping that actually comes from ignorance and the grasping at one's existence as if one existed in an independent way, and based on that wrong view, one acts and suffers. But then something happens, something happens 2 seconds later, and then that person gets angry. So on a theoretical plane, everyone's Buddhist, but then on a practical view, it's much harder. So even if you have philosophically or you have conceptually a spiritual view, but we're talking about how we actually live our life, the real paradigm that one follows. So in that the mundane paradigm is divided into 2 ways. There's the mundane paradigm where one thinks that it's possible to be happy through an external development of material development. I will be happy when this will be like that, and this will be like this thing, and in this life. And then there's the mundane paradigm where it says, okay, it's not possible to be happy in this life. Life will never be the way I think it should be. But if I act in a certain way, after death, I'll be able to reach that. And here we have the idea of heaven. Beyond the actual religion, most religions, when we talk about heaven, what is heaven? It's a place, a reality where we can have everything we want. We can avoid everything that we don't want, and never have to be separated from what I like. And we see that every culture, heaven is described differently according to culture. If you were to ask young people today to describe what they think heaven would be, for them certainly, quick, fast internet connection would be present. So this is still part of the mundane view. The spiritual view, beyond the actual religion, is where happiness, the state of well-being, avoiding suffering, isn't projected into a perfect world, but it's projected onto my own behavior and my own inner state of being and the way I live reality. The Buddhist teachings are part of this worldview, and within there are many different views. In Buddhism, the principles start with the fact that suffering comes from a physical level and mental level, and as long as our body and minds are polluted with ignorance, understood as interacting interacting and seeing the world in an incoherent way, as long as we're obsessed with our selfishness and self-grasping, or we're not able to see anything beyond ourselves, and as long as one is taken by, as a consequence, taken by anxiety, arrogance, jealousy, miserliness, anger, etc., he will interact with the world through this. So it doesn't matter where he'll go, he'll suffer. And this is called the all-permeating suffering. The fact that no matter where you go, as long as you have those filters, you will live reality in that way. I think that's quite clear, isn't it? So, why do we suffer? This is the second fundamental point. There are actually 4 questions. The first one is, what is suffering? What is it that we want to avoid? The second, why do we suffer? The third, what is happiness? And the fourth is, what can I do to be happy and avoid suffering? I mean, these are all questions we all have, and I invite you all to ask yourselves these questions seriously. If suffering for me is only is physical and mental, I'll do everything to avoid it. But if I see that it's not enough, for example, if I have something that smells bad, it's not enough to cover it up with perfume, because as long as that putrid smell is there, as soon as the perfume wears off, that smell comes back. When we're not well, what do we do normally? Do we try to resolve our inner conflict, or do we spray a little bit of perfume and take the and look the other way? Normally, when we're not well, we put our attention into some kind of distraction. We try to do something that makes us forget that feeling, that emotion. So we look for sensory pleasures. We try to do something to make us forget what we're feeling, be it on a mental or physical level. So we spray a little bit perfume and we cover up the bad smell, but sooner or later it comes out. On the first level is suffering is not only when there's something stinky. I mean, it doesn't matter how much perfume that I spray, that putrid smell is still there. That anger is still there. So it's wonderful to experience the perfume and pleasurable moments, but it's not enough. So at the end of the day, I mean, nothing against pleasures or moments of enjoyment, because, I mean, let's tell the truth. When we get an object of desire, we're happy. On a material object, I'm happy if I get something that I want. I imagine everybody is. I don't think there's anything wrong or negative or ugly or wrong about getting something material and feeling happiness about it. What's not right is projecting our happiness onto that and thinking that that thing is going to make us happy. That's a huge trap. So when it's there, it's there. And if there's something that we like, enjoy it. But I can't condition my happiness with that thing. It's like about the pleasure of eating. If I have something that I like, something to eat, when I have it, I eat it. Oh, how wonderful. I drink water that I like so much, and I really enjoy it to the maximum. But when it's not there, that's fine too. Try not to condition my happiness. So what we want to avoid as far as suffering is concerned is not just the sensation, that feeling of mental or physical suffering, but it's that unbalance, that malaise, physical or mental, that actually generates that feeling of suffering. In other words, when we go to a doctor, for example, why do we go to a doctor normally? Because we have symptoms, right? What do we want? Do we want to avoid our symptoms, or do we want to heal the sickness? Actually, we just want to eliminate our symptoms. But if we're a little bit wiser, we need to recognize that the symptom is a result of the sickness, and if I don't want to have the symptoms, I need to eliminate this. I need to cure the sickness. But there's a difference. The sickness is a state of unbalance that produces symptoms. So what happens if I take care only of the symptoms, or they'll come back, or even get worse. So there are three aspects. There's the symptom, there's the sickness, and then there's the cause of the sickness. Because of that, physical imbalance is caused by the lifestyle, for example, and I take medicine and I do things to bring back to balance, but I keep my negative lifestyle that's going to regenerate that sickness. That unbalanced state is going to keep coming back. There's a verse from Gyu Lama that says, sickness is to be identified. The causes are to be abandoned. The state of health is to be is to believe in and to get, and the healing process should be begun. The medicines to take. So here we have mainly three things. We have symptom, sickness, and causes of sickness. So the symptoms should be seen. But the real problem are not the symptoms. We need to try to heal the sickness. If I have a headache, it's not a sickness. It's not an illness. But normally, what's our tendency? You know, we get a headache. Do we look at our liver or our neck problems, or we just take a pill? I mean, for me, for example, rarely do I have a headache, but sometimes it happens, a kind of tension that comes from my neck. And after a couple times, I really tried to look for the cause. I tried to eliminate the tension in my neck. And actually, I realized that it came from my digestion. What does that have to do? It means that the tension that's created, in our intestines can actually create tension in our neck and bring a headache. And if I don't take care of the intestines, that headache is always going to come back again and again, regardless of how many massages I do. If I don't try to avoid, to cure that the tension that is being created in my intestines. So the symptoms should be seen, the sickness should be seen, and the causes need to be abandoned. There are four types of objects: material objects, people, things that we interact with. So we can divide everything that we interact with into 4 categories. There are situations that are pleasurable, that are good for us. And we don't need to worry, because the things that are pleasurable and are good for us, naturally we're attracted to them. The first challenge is things that are pleasurable but are bad for us. Things that at that first moment they're pleasurable, but mid and long term they're actually bad. A very simple example, I love mozzarella, but it's bad for me. So it's something that's pleasurable, but mid and long term is really bad for me. And for everyone I'm sure has a long list of things that we eat, and the way we sleep, the way we talk, the way we interact, and many, many things. This is one of the first important challenges, being able to avoid that which is pleasurable but is bad for us. The third type of situation is those that are painful and are also bad for us, and we don't need to worry about that, because things we don't like and that are also bad for us, we don't have to put effort into avoiding. But the fourth category is the things that are displeasurable but mid and long term are actually good for us, things that we don't like a lifestyle, like for food or interaction, and maybe at first hand they're things that we don't like, but mid and long term they're really good for us. So 2 very important challenges are recognizing what is pleasurable and what is bad for us and being able to avoid it, and what is negative but that's good for us, and be able to cultivate that. And I invite you to make your own list, to observe, starting from very superficial levels, like food, or waking up early compared to waking up late, or the relationship you have with your cell phone. We can make many, many examples. The way we speak, the way we interact with other people, the emotions that we want to show, the things that, what are the things that are beneficial but are actually things that are pleasurable but are actually bad for us, and what are the things that we don't like that are actually good for us. And now we will work on the causes. So the second question is why do I suffer? Where attention is no longer on suffering itself or pleasure on itself, but what are the things that I do with physically, verbally, and mentally that generate suffering? That's the question. In my own life, what's my own conduct, my behavior of mental, verbal, physical, that brings suffering? There's a very important concept. I realize that there are many, many things to do. And there are things there are things that we can do that really make a difference, and other things that we can put a lot of effort into and not really have much result. So I think it's important to put energy where we have the best conditions to make a difference and have results. Second is, when we talk about a problem is something that can be resolved. It has a solution. Something is my problem if I can apply a solution. If something is if there is a situation and you can resolve it, then it's your problem. I mean, the way you the way you behave towards me is not my problem. Not because I don't care about you, but because I can't resolve that situation. Who can resolve the way someone acts towards us? That person. How I interact with your behavior towards me, that's my problem, because I can resolve that. So, in front of this, we get into this attitude where we ask ourselves, what can I do? Where can I interact? Where can I make a difference? What can I change, really? And this reminds me the manual of the Greek Stoics that says that things are of two kinds, things that depend on us and things that don't depend on us, but depend on themselves. Things that, he says, things that don't depend on us, you know, how people behave, what happens around us, and our own body. What depends on us, our choices, our actions, our values. And he goes on to say that suffering comes from trying to have control over what doesn't depend on us and losing control of what depends on us. So the key would be to have control over what depends on us and not have attachment to that which we have no control over. Some aspects are really similar to Buddhism. So if I look at the world around me, are there things that I don't like? Me, yes. I don't know how you feel when you see around you, you know, people close to you, the way they behave, up to getting to the most macro level of society on a national, international level. There are things that we don't like, that we think would be better if they were different. Yes, of course. But they don't depend on us. The only thing that we can do is interact. So, what depends on me? Where do my actions have a real power of transformation? Where can I actually do something? In my physical interactions, in my verbal interactions, and in my thoughts, my emotions. I have power over these three things. I don't have power over other things. The only thing that I have power over, and each one of us has power over, is our own actions, our own speech, and our own thoughts. Obviously, by transforming these, we interact differently and we can influence differently the world. There's a very strong example that's quite present, is the example of war. Why is there war? What generates war? Unfortunately, not just the war in the Ukraine. There are so many wars, conflicts in the world. But if we looked at all wars and asked ourselves why, we could of course talk about the history of each country and talk about the geopolitical situation and the various economic influences. We could have thousands of different explanations. But even before all of that, why is there war? For material objective reasons or for subjective reasons? In other words, does it come from like matter, or does it come from the mind of man? It comes from selfishness. It comes from It comes from this inability of taking care, of seeing and taking care of others, this need to have more and more power, this attachment to being right and seeing others' view as being wrong. It comes from fear, but it actually comes from selfishness. So even problems on material, external, national, international level, this all comes from the human mind. And the solution, where is the solution found? In the human mind. To stop a war, at the end of the day, where's the solution? It's in the mind. Obviously, it's not easy. I can only access my own mind. I didn't want to talk about this now, but what happens is the place where transformation and change is possible is within one's own mind. And it's through our speech, our physical actions, and our thoughts that we live our world. But let's talk about our own small world. What determines this small world of ours? The objective, material situation, or the way we interact with these situations? Remembering that physical actions and verbal actions come from the mind. So we can really make the difference in our way of acting. That's why I really invite you to make a list. What are the physical behaviors, verbal behavior, which means also the ones that we write, and mental, the way we think, the way our emotions. What are the ones that are pleasurable but are harmful, and what are the ones that are actually displeasurable but that are beneficial? What do we want to cultivate? What do we want to abandon? And this falls under the causes of suffering. According to Buddhist view, suffering comes from this obsession with self-grasping, this inability to see others. The fact that we are constantly obsessed with the I and the my, and we live everything through my needs, my desires. And someone says, "Oh, I'm not selfish. For me, my children are more important than myself." Yeah, because they're your children. Remembering that the my is an extension of the I. But if we look at the conflicts, on a personal level, familiar level, and all the way up to an international level, they come from this obsession of self-grasping that also comes from ignorance, a view that does not correspond to reality. But we're not going to open that door now. So if suffering comes from our actions, mental, physical, and verbal, is it possible to reach a state of happiness, and how? We saw this before. What is happiness? Where do we project our happiness? And this is one of the most important points for our lives. Because being very sincere, very transparent, none of us, no one does what he doesn't want to do. At the end of the day, we do what we want. And one of the greatest strengths that exists is our desire. The sixth Dalai Lama, Tsayang Gyatso was his name. It's a very long story. He didn't want to follow the monastic life. he didn't want to become the king of Tibet, also because he grew up in a very particular context, a little bit strange, because the fifth Dalai Lama, who was actually the first one to be called Dalai Lama, um, so the Tibetans give titles post-mortem. So the first previous Dalai Lamas, which were known as previous lives of the then fifth Dalai Lama, but when they were alive, they weren't known as Dalai Lamas. So the fifth Dalai Lama, in some verses you can find that he's the first Dalai Lama. He was one of the most important in the story of Tibet. He was able to unite to Tibet, the Tibetans, and so many small realms became one land. And through his power, religious power and military power, through the Mongols and Genghis Khan, so the military power coming through Mongolia and his religious power, he was able to unify Tibet, and he became the king. And what happened is, at a certain point, as it happens to everyone, he died. His main minister, the name is on the tip of my tongue, but I can't think of it now. This is Sangye Gyatso was his name. This is Sangye Gyatso. He recognizes that Tibet was in a very unstable moment politically, and if they knew that the fifth Dalai Lama were dead, then there could be trouble. So he hid his death for about 18 years. He found someone who looked like him. There were no photographs at the time. He found someone who looked like him, and when a delegation would come, or when someone important would come, he was there, present, the moment of the ceremony, etc. He would say 3 words, and every once in a while would give blessings, ceremonies, etc. And 20 years went by. In the meantime, his reincarnation was recognized, and this young boy was raised being the 6th Dalai Lama, but without being able to be it. So it was a very complex situation. The point is, the 6th Dalai Lama, at a certain point, he ran away from the Potala, the palace in Lhasa. He didn't want to have anything to do with this. And at the end of the day, the 6th Dalai Lama, he was remembered as a great poet. He was full of girlfriends everywhere. And he wrote many love poems. And in one of these poems, he wrote, something like that. This last line I can't remember, but the translation slightly commented says, if I desired enlightenment as much as I desire women, I'd already be enlightened. And in another case, he used the specific woman, where he said, if I desired enlightenment as much as I desire you, I'd already be enlightened. More literally, he says, if my mind went towards the Dharma the way it runs to you, then I would certainly become a Buddha in one lifetime. Sayang Gyatso was absolutely right. When we're in love with something or someone, how often do we think of that person or that thing? Once someone said to me, just once, that just never ends. When someone is in love and wakes up, and there's the thought. You see the sun, the sun, the rain, whatever it is, that you see it through the filter of this love. And it says that people can also do crazy things for love, and it's not love, it's passion. Or maybe someone falls in love with a person, or someone falls in love with himself, or falls in love with a project or an objective, power, money, different things. But there's one thing that's very clear. When we fall in love with something or someone, we put all of our energy in that direction. And for this, it's one of the most important points for our life is understanding, identifying what we want. Where do we put our energy? What are we passionate about? And if we were to translate in a simpler way, the first realization along the Buddhist path, called Nechung, often translated as renunciation, but I don't really think that's a good translation. The right translation would be this certainty to emerge. But that first step this first step is about falling in love with inner peace, having passion to say, okay, everything's fine, but I want to be at peace with myself. This is something we live it with desire, with passion, with something that goes beyond the conceptual aspects. Because no matter how much we say, oh, suffering comes from the mental defilements, peace is important, but if we don't have passion for it, we don't put our energy into it. And here, every once in a while I ask myself, if we were given two possibilities, a sure nirvana, a state of inner peace that's sure through a graduated, long, tiresome process, or a comfortable samsara, immediate comfortable samsara, what would we choose? Maybe we say, okay, an immediate comfortable samsara, and then I've got time to, then I can go towards nirvana. I think this is so important, but there are two characteristics. One characteristic is understanding what I want. Another characteristic that goes together is believing that I can get there. Because if I have attraction, aspiration towards something, and I don't believe that I can get there, will I ever put energy into getting it? No. Giving just a very simple example. A few years ago, I found myself needing to buy a car. And so what I did is I went to see my resources, how much money I had available to buy the car. I set a budget, and I went to see, I looked at the cars that were in my budget, and I saw, okay, how could I have the best car for my needs, etc., etc. There were cars that were more beautiful than the ones that I could afford. There were many, but I didn't even desire them. Why? Because I saw once from this ad from Rolls-Royce in Amsterdam, there was this huge billboard, and the Rolls-Royce, it said, if you ask the price, it's not the car for you. If you're asking the price, it's not the car for you. Okay, so I'm not even going to start desiring it because I know that I don't have the means to get it. So why do I not desire a Rolls Royce? Because I don't believe that I could afford it. If they come to me and say, you can have a Rolls Royce in very comfortable installments, 200 euros a month for your whole life. Oh, okay, maybe I can get that. Okay, and at that point, maybe I want it. So we desire something based on two characteristics: what we want and having faith in our ability to get it, to reach it. So what happens often is if I were to ask you, do we want to live in a state of balance, peace, satisfaction, to be at peace with ourselves independently of where we are, with whom we are, and the situation we find ourselves in? And the answer would be yes. I don't see any problems here. The problem is in that second part. But do you deeply believe that you can reach that state? There's a little bit more difficult, because if I don't think that I can buy that car, why should I put money aside? If I think that I can, then I can put effort into saving up money and getting it. But if I don't believe it, I'm not going to even start to work for it. And along our spiritual path, if we believe in the importance of inner peace, but we don't believe in our own ability to reach it, we'll never really put effort into it. And it's for this is why we need faith in Buddha, not like the actual person, but the state to reach, and faith in ourselves, in our own ability to reach that state. This is fundamental. A little bit like when you go to the doctor for an illness, I need to have faith in the doctor and the treatment he gives me. I need to desire the state of health, but I need to also believe that I can get there. Because if I don't think that I can be cured from this sickness, why should I follow these difficult treatments or take bitter medicine if I don't think that if I can be healed? So our faith in our faith and thinking that we can do it is fundamental. So in that third point, which is the truth, the truth of cessation of the Three Noble Truths. So it's important that we ask ourselves, what do I want? And have the faith in ourselves that we can reach it. Once I have that, then we have that next phase, which is how. There's a part of the teachings that come to my mind, the six awarenesses. It's said that when we listen to the Dharma, the spiritual teachings of Buddha, it's said that we should listen with 6 awarenesses. The first awareness or discernment is seeing ourselves as the patient. I'm not listening teachings because I'm interested, but because I am in need. It's like going, maybe I go to the doctor because I'm interested in, one thing is going to the doctor to learn about a certain sickness. Another thing is going to the doctor because I have that sickness. So this awareness of being the patient and the one who teaches us, who guides us, should be seen as the doctor, remembering that the doctor cannot cure anyone. I've never seen a doctor or a healer, regardless of the tradition, be able to cure someone. The only thing that a doctor or a healer, call it what you want, can do is to interact with the patient to help him. Cannot actually heal. So I see myself as a patient. He who guides me, who guides me spiritually, is like the doctor, and the teachings that I receive are like the medicine. The fourth awareness, that process, the healing treatment, it comes by taking medicine and following the treatment. Otherwise, you cannot get healed. Because if I go to the doctor, with all the respect in the world for the doctor, I go to the doctor and I take his prescription, I buy the medicine, and I put my medicine on the shelf, and I praise the medicine every day, and the doctor, oh, how wonderful that the doctor gave me this treatment. Too bad I don't actually follow what he told me to do. The process of healing comes by taking the medicine and following the treatment, avoiding certain aspects, lifestyles, and creating others, and following the cure at the same time. The healing process comes by putting into practice our teachings, the way we think, the way we speak, the way we speak, the way we act. The fifth awareness is the trust that we have to be able to be healed. And the sixth is that the healing process is long and graduated. Because if I go to the doctor, seeing myself as the patient, seeing the doctor as the one to give me the healing treatment, following the treatment he gives me, taking the medicine, believing that I can be healed, but I expect to be healed within 3 days. After the 4th day, I say it's not working. It's not for me. It's not good. But since my disease is chronic, the actual treatment is gradual, and this sickness of obsession, of self-gratification and selfishness and other inner conditionings, this is a chronic problem. It takes time to be healed. So this is very important for me, this awareness that the process of healing is a long process, a gradual process. And this means that we should be kind with ourselves. Because here another important point comes up. I'll try to just summarize it. If someone comes to us and says, "Oh, you shouldn't be like this," what would we say? "I'm sorry, I'm like this." Right? This is the way I am. I would like to be different too, but this is the way I am. I'm putting effort into changing, etc. But in this moment, I am like this. And why are you like this? Because my whole life, and in the whole, from genetics to the different predispositions, all the experience I've lived in the past, the choices I've made, the interactions that I've had, they've all brought me into this present moment to be like this. It's a little bit like an equation. Let's make a very complex equation. Many, many, many numbers to multiply, to subtract, and let's imagine that that everyone thinks of a different number and whether it needs to be multiplied or divided, etc. And at the end, we get to one result, and the result is 5. Why is the result of that equation 5? Everyone who chose a number determined the actual result. If someone says, okay, I do want to change my number, instead of 5, my number is 6, is that final number the same or is it different? It changes. So, the situation of this present moment is the result of that equation. It can not be anything but that. Given all of the numbers, let's say. So our physical state of being, our emotional state of being, our mental state of being, the relationships we have materially, our whole life with all the different aspects, it's like that very complex equation. And if we were to ask ourselves, why is it like that? Is it because of of each singular numbers or the whole of those numbers? And if one thing were different, then the result would be different. Of course. And this brings us to the fact that we shouldn't use the word if. Once I had gone with my sister in Brazil. We needed to travel and I needed to do the yellow fever vaccination. And my sister said, do you want to go by car or by metro? And we were in São Paulo. I said, well, let's go by car. It's like about 45 minutes to get there, another 40 minutes to park, 10 minutes for the vaccine, and another half an hour or so to get back. And as we were coming back in a massive traffic jam of São Paulo, my sister said, if we had taken the metro, we would already be home. And then we could be watching a nice movie. And I said, that's true. But let's say, what if instead we had gone by metro and you had slipped and broken your arm? We'd be at the hospital right now. And if we had gone by metro and someone had stolen my wallet with all my documents, we would be at the police station. After if, anything that you say, anything can happen. And we have no idea what that thing is. So from that moment on, I started taking the word if out of my vocabulary. Don't use if anymore. It just doesn't exist. What's interesting is when we change our way of speaking, we change our way of thinking. For 1 week, take out the word if. See if that makes any difference in the way you think. So how we are today, our state, are there characteristics of ourselves that we don't like? Do we have conditionings or habits and moods, ways of speaking, or that would be better if they were different? No, I do. I imagine that each one of you as well. But let's remember that the starting point, the closest starting point, the departure point to get where we want is where we are. So I always need to start from where I am. So I need to accept myself with affection. It's not about pointing a finger and saying, oh, I'm jealous and I'm envious because I'm nervous and I have so much anxiety. Okay, let's see what's not working. But we need to put energy into cultivating what is good for us, starting from an attitude of affection for ourselves, of love for ourselves, where we accept the present and we direct ourselves towards the future that we want to realize. There are many, many things that, in my opinion, would be better if they were different, but we need to welcome this moment, this present moment, accept this present moment. And accepting doesn't mean that 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 you have to suffer. Acceptance means it's like this. How it happened is because of a very, very complex combination of causes and effects, but I want to go towards the direction that I want to reach. I mean, this is a very important key. We accept the present and we direct ourselves with awareness towards the future that we want. With the relationship with someone else, for example, there's conflict. I don't want to relate with conflict. So I accept that this present moment is like this, but I need to act with awareness to create harmony and not to react to the conflict, which will just increase the conflict. So I don't want to have conflict with you, but you're conflictuous with me. But our tendency would be actually to increase the conflict by reacting in the same conflictual way. But if our objective is to live in harmony, live harmoniously, we need to put energy towards the love of friendship, satisfaction, towards the harmony. And that's here we can see ourselves, accept ourselves with kindness and direct ourselves towards the future that we want. And it's said also that problems and our mental defilements, our bad physical habits, verbal and mental habits, they should be seen, they should be identified, but the energy should be put in the solution. So we should identify where the darkness is, but the energy goes towards directing the light to where there's darkness, joy, stability, love, because the more I go towards the light, the more the darkness fades. Just pointing your finger at the darkness doesn't take it away, and suffering and complaining because it's dark doesn't take the darkness away either. Once I heard someone said, with all the suffering that I've had, if I don't reach enlightenment, but since when does suffering equate to spiritual development? If that were so, then let's add nails to our mala and do some like self-flagellation. It'd be easy to generate like self-affliction and suffering, but it's very true that without suffering, one doesn't generate the passion and the desire to get beyond suffering. This is another point. But the growth doesn't come by suffering. The suffering can be something that allows us to want to go beyond, to get out of it. Because by nature we're lazy, at least I am. And 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 as long as we stay in our comfort zone, we don't put any effort into changing. But what brings spiritual development is not suffering. It's generosity, love, awareness, joy, stability, satisfaction, gratitude. It's cultivating aspects, our way of of feeling and speaking and thinking. In conclusion, life goes by quickly. Today we're here. Tomorrow's Christmas. I mean, really it goes by quickly. And then soon we're going to die. I don't mean to be pessimistic, but even if we were to have a very long life, it goes by quickly, doesn't it? And what happens is the various situations that we live beautiful moments, difficult moments, and things finish, but we continue. And what stays is not what we have done or what we have lived, but it's the way that we live, that experience that remains. So when I go somewhere, what remains with me is not the place. It's not the place that I went to, but the way I experienced that place. If I have a conflict with someone, what stays with me is not the conflict, but the way I lived that conflict. In other words, how did that experience shape my being? That's what remains with me. Every once in a while, it seemed to me that when we're very young, we have this idea that life is to come, and then we get to a certain point of our lives, and we're too busy with life to live it. We're too busy with taking care of our family and working. Oh, I can't do what I want to do because I'm too busy with life. And then there's the moment where after the years have gone by and we say, okay, life has gone. I mean, where is it that life happens? Now, here, in this moment. Like the great wise advice given by Kung Fu Panda master. Have you seen that? Have you ever seen the movie Kung Fu Panda? It's one of the greatest movies about Buddhism. And there's the master of Kung Fu Panda who says before dying he transforms into light, which is also a Buddhist idea. He goes to Kung Fu Panda and he says, remember that the past is no longer there. The future needs to happen. The present is the only thing you have, and that's why we call it a present, like a gift. And so what we have is this moment now. And life happens in the simplest of activities, of meeting people, interacting with people, of eating, of sleeping, and every moment of our lives, the way that we interact with others, that shapes our being. We today, we're the result of this very complex equation, which the elements are all the moments that we've lived up to now. And if one thing were different, the result would be different. In this present moment, the way I live that is going to determine what will happen. So let's not waste this life. Let's live this life with more awareness, trying to use every moment, every situation in a very meaningful way. And by meaningful, I mean that that situation helps us grow to become a more stable person, a more loving person, so that we can gradually cultivate, we can actually cultivate what helps us be better with ourselves and with others. I've had different situations in my life. They were at the moment were difficult, even one that's quite recent, that for which I'm really grateful for various reasons in my life. I've I've never had people against me in an aggressive way. Um, Sometimes I've had situations of how can you say some like discrimination or situations of different kinds of aversion. But what I saw is that when I live difficult situations or conflict, for example, where someone comes towards me aggressively and does something, let's say, to me, I would see it as something I want to avoid. I think it's happened to everyone to have to interact with people who were aggressive towards you. What I saw is that in these moments, I have two choices in these moments, three actually. One is to let me be taken by an automatic, spontaneous reaction. And normally, when someone is aggressive towards us, our tendency is to become defensive and go on the counterattack. Maybe we smile, but inside something's moving. The other possibility is to pretend that nothing's happening and just go move on to something else. And that still something is moving inside. Another possibility that actually exists is to look at the situation and recognize it as a mirror, to see what's inside. I can choose with awareness how I want to interact with that situation. If I want to let myself be overwhelmed by the conditioning that I have of anger or resentment, or if I want to choose differently. So where can we actually practice love and patience? So it's a marvelous opportunity. I'm deeply grateful to these situations that I've lived, because these are the situations that allow me to grow. Otherwise, I should get comfortable in my comfort zone. I relax in my comfort zone. When I get outside my comfort zone, and to I need to once I'm pushed out of my comfort zone, then I need to grow so that I can be once again comfortable in this new zone. What I mean to say is there's there's no we shouldn't wait for the right conditions to practice our spiritual path. We should accept as something incredibly precious every experience. So it's our experiences every day at work or with our family, within the couple, or whatever the situation is. Th- these are the moments that allow us to really practice. And someone would tell me, "Oh, this is really tiresome." Yes, it is. But the opposite is also exhausting. In Tibetan, it said, if you stand up, you hit your head. If you sit down, you you hit your tush, your bottom. But at the end of the day, it's tiresome. So it's better to work hard for something that brings positive results and is beneficial. For this reason, in conclusion, my conclusion is it's not that important if someone thinks that they're Buddhist. The Buddhism is made up of three fundamental aspects. There's the worldview, there's rules of conduct, where, for there's example, the development of generosity, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, wisdom, the part of abandoning negative behaviors, and then there's the part of method, techniques like meditation that allow us to apply this conduct and to the worldview. We should at least begin, as one begins his own practice, one should ask what he wants. Not what do I want to do, but who do I want to become? In the Buddhist tradition, all these images that we see here, in reality, without getting into details, they're here to tell us that they did it, and they were able, and we can do it too. The 5 Dhyani Buddhas with the 5 great mothers, that's like testimonials. But you don't, those is like, it's a Buddhist advertising, but you don't get this state by having to buy something or spending money, but there's a path to follow. And for me, it's not important to me if you're Buddhist or not. What's important to me is, at the end of the day, how we want to live our lives. And this is what matters, because I'm sure that at the moment that we die, it's not that there's the quick path for the Buddhists, the Buddhists this way and non-Buddhists that way, and within the Buddhists, there's all the different traditions. No, what makes the difference is how we live our day, how we live our lives daily, and how we transform. I invite you to try to live your life in the most sincere and transparent way possible. In other words, to not play games with yourself. Getting back to that golden rule that I said before, do what you want. What's important is that it works for you. In Buddhism, Buddha, he had his path that worked for him and shared it with others so that it could work for them too. And over the centuries, it has worked for so many. So because it's working, we keep trying to share this path. But let's remember today that first we identify where we want to go, so that we can gradually take a step after one step after the other, with affection for ourselves, with effort. And this takes me to one last thing very quickly. This is a very practical piece of advice. Don't judge people, starting with ourselves, but judge actions, choices, judge views. I can say this behavior it should be avoided. It's not beneficial. And that one should be cultivated. This worldview for me doesn't correspond to reality, but we shouldn't generalize a person through their actions. Because what happens is when I judge the person and not their behavior, I generate aversion towards the person. And instead, if I judge the actual behavior, then I'm judging that actual behavior, not the person. It changes completely the dynamics of the relationship. The saying that a person is a liar, what does that mean? How many times do you need to lie to be considered a liar? Is there someone here that has never told a lie? I don't think so. So are we all liars? I don't think, we think, oh, I'm not a liar. Oh, it's not that I always tell lies. Well, at that point, there are no liars. So we shouldn't say that this person is a liar. We can say that lies are not beneficial, and the person shouldn't be judged, but the conduct. We can clearly discern that it's something negative to us. Because we have beautiful aspects of ourselves and negative aspects too. And this is what we need to work on, starting from having love and affection for ourselves, and for others. Even when we see someone who doesn't act in the way that we think is correct, we should accept that person, trying to help that person change his behavior. And there are different ways to try to do that, which we're not going to open now. Now it's time for lunch. I had a master in India. When I had a master in India, we always knew what time his teachings would begin, but we never knew what time he would finish. But in this context, it's not so appropriate. So judge actions, judge ideas, ways of acting verbally, but not the actual person. This changes our way of acting, and remember that to take away the word if. If this had happened, or no, what can I do now? Because we live in a world where there's a generalized tendency to criticize and then put our hands up. This isn't right, that's not right, but who am I to make any change? So I can't do anything. So I stay in my small comfort zone, and then I just point my finger at everyone. Instead, my point is, what can I do in my small part? I'm against the war. Okay, what can I do? Try to not act aggressively. Try to not get into certain interdependencies that can increase these negative situations. But my point is, looking at my own conduct, starting with ourselves, what can I do? We should start with ourselves, but not only for ourselves. I do it because I want to offer to others. This is very important. We work on ourselves, but not for ourselves, exclusively for ourselves. This is another important key, that we're here to be at the service, to help others. This is already the next step. So here I have a request to make. If there's something that you heard that could be beneficial, something that was said, try to put it into practice. Remember it this evening, tomorrow morning, try to apply it, because life goes by quickly, and the difference the difference can be found in what we actually do, how we apply what we found to be beneficial. This is what I wanted to share mostly. I thank you for being here. For me, it's a great honor to share a little bit what I have received and I find beneficial, and I hope that it can be beneficial for you too. We're here to walk together. We can call this path our lives. This afternoon, after lunch, there will be what is called the refuge ceremony. It's not directly connected to the introduction to Buddhism, but for logistical purposes, it's on the same day. It's a time where it's a ceremony. It's a time to formalize a commitment that one takes to follow the Buddhist teachings within Buddhist teachings like a spiritual path. You're welcome to come if you're just curious, or you don't have to formalize anything or take any kind of commitment. But if you're just interested, you're welcome to come. If you're just interested to know more about it, or you're curious, you're welcome. For me, something that's really important here at the center and in general, everyone should feel at home. Obviously, there are a few rules here and there, but it's so one shouldn't feel forced in any way to do anything. I thank you again to be here, and now we'll do our final dedications to conclude. In the Buddhist tradition, there are two actions, one at the beginning and one at the end. At the beginning, we generate motivation. We remember why we do what we do, and at the end, we dedicate. Also reminding ourselves why we did what we have done. So now it's time for our dedications. Our motivation, and when we said in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment with the practice of generosity. May I reach Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. So that's where we generate our motivation, and now we dedicate. Let's dedicate among many, many things that we can dedicate. May we dedicate that these are not only words, but that we can transform, we can understand, and we can transform the understanding into experience, and from the experience to truly grow.
Losan tempe drume sasumgi drove munsela takto ne gyurchi kewakuntu yanda lama dang dralme cheki pela longche ching sadan lamge yonte rabzone dorje change kopa nyurtobsho nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan dele kshin Ninsen taktu delek pe kuncho sumke chingelo kuncho sumke ngodrubotsol kuncho sumke trashishu.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to obtain all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Repeat after me. Sem Chu Sutro, Chu Lam Tutro, Lam La Parche, Io Marsho. May the mind become the Dharma. May the Dharma become the path. May the path be free from interferences. Trashidele, have a good lunch, and we will come back at 3:30. Thank you.